Holy shit, this is the longest intro ever.
Accused me essentially of race baiting. Says it's something that I do all the time. Says he's got to turn down the volume every time I'm speaking. He said a lot of things about me. And to his credit, when I invited him on the show to have a man-to-man conversation, he did not hesitate.
Man-to-man.
He actually was supposed to do this days ago. I had to postpone. So, giving credit where credit is due, giving him an opportunity to express whatever it is that he wanted to express to me, about George Floyd, about the whole situation involving his murder at the hands of Derek Chauvin and beyond, I was more than happy to do so. I think it's safe to say that both of us might have learned a little thing or two from this conversation we had.
Oh, boy.
How pleasant was it? How tense was it? You'll have to watch to see for yourself. I'm not going to give away the details. All I'm going to tell you is that it's worth watching. And keep in mind, it's me leaning on what I always tell y'all. You might think differently than me politically. You might come from a different ethnic background. Your ideology may not be the same as mine. I'm a centrist who leans left. He clearly leans right. I'm not one of those people who believes because you don't think the way that I think that you should be vilified and excoriated and what have you. Just because you think differently than me doesn't mean I'm going to shut you down and I don't want to hear a damn word that you have to say. I'm not built like that. I believe grown-ups get together and talk and hash things out in a respectful and decent manner. He called me a jackass. I don't know whether he's capable of doing what I just described myself as doing and being. But I'm about to find out.
Did you see Harry Sisson's Twitter response? Nope.
This is a listening session. Asking what I want to ask, but listening to his point of view and his perspective. And showing him the respect any decent human being deserves. That's what I'm going to do with Ben Shapiro up next. Ben, how are you, sir? How's everything?
Thank God, doing well, Stephen. How are you doing?
Okay, I want to ask, and I asked this affectionately. I'm not trying to be incendiary. You called me a jackass. How many dudes do you call a jackass, and then you go on this show? Could you tell me that? Could you answer that one first?
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, and the invitation, as you know, is open the other way around. It's shockingly, the answer is probably a lot, actually, in terms of the number of people who I've called a jackass who I've then actually become friendly with, or who I've had on the show, or vice versa. So you're in this business, you know it.
I got you. I'm not overly offended. Trust me on that. All right. But thank you for coming on the show. So let's get right into it. As you know, I spoke out against your petition to get President Trump to pardon former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. For those that don't know, Chauvin was sentenced to 22 years in prison after being convicted of unintentional second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter of George Floyd. I wondered if you would feel that way if the officer was black and the victim was Jewish. That was what I said. Damn. And your response was to call me a race baiter. Damn. Why is that, Ben Shapiro?
Well, to me, the entire case against Derek Chauvin was rooted in a sort of public racial essentialism that I thought was unnecessary to analyze the case. If I'm going to look at this case and just look at the facts of the case, the race of the person on the ground and the race of the officer are irrelevant, and we should treat it exactly the same, whether both people were black, both people are white, one person was Jewish, one person was not Jewish. The identity of the person on the ground, I think, should not be the deciding factor in whether or not Derek Chauvin was convicted of second-degree murder. It should be the situation, the facts of the case, the autopsy report, and all of the rest. And so the thing that I actually objected to was the suggestion that my opinion would have changed rooted in the, say, racial or religious identity of the person who died as opposed to the racial or religious identity of the person who was the police officer. I just don't think that that's how we ought to decide criminal justice cases in general.
In fairness to you, I can understand that in general. Damn it, in most instances, I can agree with that. But those are cases that we hear about. I'm talking about the visual impact. So let's stay right there, Ben. I am a black man, and I see this black man on the ground, face down, handcuffs behind him. Face is imprinted into the pavement. The knee of the police officer is on the back of his neck. He's literally saying he can't breathe, to one point crying for his mama. And It happens for over 9 minutes. I understand from a technical perspective, from a specific analytical perspective, forensic evidence, et cetera, fentanyl in the system, et cetera. I got all of that. My point is, and my question to you at that time was,
oh God,
seeing that, how could you have another opinion? How could it be based on the preponderance of evidence that you threw into the fray in order to ask for this man to be pardoned? I'm just going by, like, there are certain things that you just see, and 1 + 1 equals 2.
So, I mean, Stephen, actually, if you go back to my tweets at the time, May 30th and June 1st, if you look at my tweets, I'm saying the same kind of things you're saying right now. I'm saying the same kind of things at that time that everybody else is saying, seeing the tape, because there's no way to look at the tape and not be sort of shocked by what you're seeing on the tape, obviously. And then I think that the mark of a reasonable person is to change your opinion as the evidence changes. A lot of evidence emerged between the time that the tape was released, that horrible 9-minute tape, and the time the conviction actually happened. I mean, there's a full trial. There were
oh boy. Let me use the restroom real quick before we get into every bullshit conspiracy that he brings up regarding this. 1 sec.
autopsy reports. There was witness evidence. There were other people whose testimony was taken. There were multiple medical specialists who were called. And so in looking at all of that, that's the way we're supposed to adjudicate whether or not a person deserves to spend 22 years in prison, not based simply on our immediate gut response to the tape. And again, I had the same gut response to the tape that you did, and I think that everybody did. I think actually that tends to be the gut response of people when we see a lot of police activity. Actually, it turns out that the police do a lot of things that look really rough on tape and really difficult on tape, and this was one of those things. And then as we later learned that, for example, the sort of tactic that Chauvin is using there was actually trained by the Minneapolis Police Department, right? Like,
this is a thing that I wish I could, I need to watch the deals of the case because they address claims like this, like whether the police department trained them in this or not. Because he's saying this, but I thought they brought in a training officer to testify that they actually weren't trained that way. But I don't know because I didn't watch the trial, so I can't speak to this part.
It's a submission technique that's used if you have a person who's resisting arrest, or if you learn during the course of the investigation that George Floyd was saying, "I can't breathe," before he was even taken out of the car. He says, "I can't breathe" on the longer tape 6 times before he's even taken out of the car. I mean, it's a very long interaction with the police officers.
He does say that. I'm surprised he doesn't bring up the other one where he's like, and he said, take me out of the car, put me on the ground. He also says that too. And it's like clear that he's like just talking shit because he just doesn't want to be arrested. But that doesn't mean that you can then put him on the ground and sincerely keep him from breathing, right? Like, I think that if Chauvin, there was the guy in the New York subway that choked and killed that one dude. And I thought the totality of that choke was like, I thought it was less than 2 minutes. Am I wrong on that? Did we look it up? It was actually longer? It was a decently short amount of time, and then the guy died. Like, if that was the case with Chauvin, where if he was like on Floyd for like a minute or two, and then the guy died, then I'd be like, okay, Jesus, that's. But like, bro, 9 minutes? Oh, people are saying 3 to 6 minutes. Maybe it was the guy stopped moving for like a short amount of time. I would have to go back and rewatch it. Maybe it was he had the guy in like a bad choke, like he couldn't get a clean choke, and then the guy was like not moving for 30 seconds, and then he let go, and then the dude was already dead, which I thought was crazy, but I don't know.
Before you get to that 9-minute tape, the part that we all saw, and there's a part of the story that you can't see on the tape, which is the reverse angle. You can't see that there's a big crowd that's shouting at Chauvin. Chauvin was responding.
No, it was clean. If it was clean, then the guy would have been passed out for 5+ minutes if he had a clean hold. Because if you had a clean hold on somebody, they're going to pass out in literally 5 seconds.
To that crowd, one of the preliminaries to getting up off of Floyd that way is to call what's called a code 4, which is where it's an all clear, where you feel that the crowd is not a threat to you.
People are saying the guy was motionless for 5 minutes straight. Okay, maybe then if he was, then I just don't remember correctly. I thought that wasn't the case, but I'd have to go back and check.
In fact, even the EMTs who showed up to provide care for Floyd didn't call a code 4 when they arrived on scene because they thought that the crowd was too threatening. So once you take into account all of the facts, if your opinion doesn't change and the fact pattern is different from what you originally thought it was, then you're not doing your job as a commentator. So I can have the same gut response that you have when I first see that tape. The question is what you do when more of those facts emerge, when you do see more of that evidence emerge, when you do read the testimony and see the autopsies.
See, but I believe, and this is just my belief, because in fairness to you, you're absolutely right. You did put out that tweet initially, and your position was it was shared by the Hannitys of the world, the Mark Levins of the world, and various others, obviously with a lot of people on the left as well, before the preponderance of evidence that you're alluding to came into play. I get that. So in fairness to you, I have to say that. But sometimes I'm going to say this to you because you're a pretty brilliant dude. Nobody can deny it with what you've accomplished with the Daily Wire, what you've been able to do in your career. I'm just reading something. You were a syndicated columnist at the age of 17, for crying out loud. This is who you are. This is who I'm talking to here. Is it possible that sometimes we could be so brilliant that our intellect gets in the way of common sense? For example, what I mean by that